With the NCAA Wrestling Championships coming up over the weekend, I just want to run through each of the weight classes, make some predictions. I'm not going to go match by match entirely, but I'll kind of go quarter by quarter and kind of work my way down, tell you who I think is going to win and who I think will make the finals, and by the end we'll look at who I think is going to win the team title. So we'll start at 125. The top seed at 125 is Thomas Gilman. He's coming into this tournament undefeated. He's been a finalist previously. It looks to be his best chance to win the title in his senior year. The most difficult opponent for him is going to be Joey Dance, who's on the other side of the bracket. Now, he's beaten Dance in the tournament before. He can definitely do it again. But that's not going to be a match that he's going to win easily. It's going to be a match that's going to be very tough. It's probably going to come down to whoever gets the final takedown. So on the top half of the draw in the first quarter, him and Nathan Krasser from Campbell are the only seeded guys. I'd imagine Gilman gets through there pretty easily. Really on the top half of the draw, if you're looking for guys who might give Gilman some trouble, I think Tim Lambert could be a tough match, although he's beaten him in the past, and I'd imagine he'd be able to beat him again. Josh Rodriguez from North Dakota State has a pretty good chance, but again, it doesn't look like anybody on this half of the draw is going to be able to give him a whole lot of trouble. Now, on the bottom half, here's the most interesting part of 125, I believe, and that is what Nick Soriano is going to show up. So when he went out to the Big Ten championships, he was limping when he was walking in the mat, so that could tell you a couple of things. If you're on the negative side, you're thinking, well, if you're Nick Soriano, you want to mask your injury, you don't want to look hurt, and for him to walk out limping on the mat, he couldn't mask it, like he still had to walk with a limp. You'd also could maybe think, well, maybe he's trying to overplay, maybe he's really close to recovery, he didn't want to take a risk at the Big Tens, but he's ready to go for an NCAAs. That's what you would have to hope for Penn State. Now, again, even if he's good enough to go, he'll still be limited in what he could do. But the question is he going to get blown off the mat and lose two straight and not get any points for Penn State, or is he going to actually make a run here? If I had to guess, I'm going to say he's going to get taken out pretty quickly. I don't think he's going to be able to wrestle with his injury and wrestle well with his injury. At best, he wins his first match, but I don't see him winning at least two matches here. So that would mean that Darian Cruz would be the other high-ranked guy on the bottom half of the draw. I think Ethan Lezak also poses a pretty good threat to Joey Dance. I think that's probably going to be the toughest match that Dance could have to face. But in the end, I'd give that bottom half of the draw to Dance. And then in the finals between Dance and Gilman, it's going to be a close one. But I'm going to give it to Thomas Gilman in his senior year. He's had Dance's number in the past. He's beaten Dance in the past. He's beaten Dance in the tournament in the past. And I think he's going to do it again this year to close out his career as a Hawkeye, as a national champion. At 133, the top-ranked guy is Nathan Tomasello, who is 19-0 at 133 now. Obviously, he wrestled at 125 last year. Won the Big Tens this year with a close win over Corey Clark, where he scored in the final seconds to get the win in regulation without having to go to sudden victory. He's got a pretty tough half of the draw, to be quite honest. He's got Corey Clark and Steven Miocic in there. Zane Richards is also going to be a tough guy. Any of those three, I mean, they've got a shot. I don't know that I'd give Richards much of a shot against Tomasello, but between Richards, Miocic, and Corey Clark, I mean, those guys have all been towards the top of the division and are all really dangerous. Now, Corey Clark came into the year ranked number 1 at this weight class. It was one of those things where we were all kind of waiting to see how he would do against Tomasello, and we all figured that it would either be Tomasello or Clark that would get the number 1 seed at the Nationals. And prior to the meet against South Dakota State, Clark got injured, wasn't able to wrestle against Seth Gross, which is unfortunate because that could have told us a lot. Philip Lau filled in for him there. And then beyond that, like it looks like he's getting better. He's wrestled a little bit better lately, but he's had some tough losses. Obviously, he lost to Cade Brock. He lost to Nathan Tomasello in the finals. He lost to Eric Montoya of Nebraska as well. So you have to wonder with him, how's his recovery going? What can he do? You have to imagine his shoulder's going to be wrapped up. He's not going to be at 100%. If he can wrestle close to what he's capable of, and that close match with Tomasello, now granted it didn't look like he was ever really at a point where he was going to win, but he was hanging in there, and when Corey Clark hangs in, you never know what's going to happen. If he can be at his best, if the extra 10 days of recovery help him out, there's a chance that he could actually make a run and give Tomasello a lot of trouble on the top half of the draw and possibly even upset him. Now, I believe last year it was Thomas Gilman who wrestled Tomasello in the semifinals, and Tomasello was expected to win that match. Gilman ended up sticking him and got to the finals. So Tomasello's been upset before, and he's been upset by Hawkeye before, for that matter. So it'll be interesting to see, but I feel like there's too much unknown about that. I think Steven Miocic is going to give Corey Clark a lot of trouble to begin with. Now, Clark has beaten Miocic this year, but a healthy Miocic versus an injured Clark, you would have to think probably goes to Miocic. If nothing else, it's going to be a very tight match. So on the top half of the draw, I'll give that to Nathan Tomasello. On the bottom half of the draw, the number 2 seed is Seth Gross. The number 3 seed is Cade Brock. Other notable guys down there, there's Dom Forrest from Pitt, but Eric Montoya as well, who has the 7th seed from Nebraska. He'll be tough. He's a guy who might be able to give Seth Gross a lot of trouble. Seth Gross, we've seen him beat Cade Brock, but we didn't get to see the Corey Clark match, and since he's not wrestling in the Big Ten, you're kind of limited in what you can see from him. I'm really high on Cade Brock. Cade Brock he's just an excellent offensive wrestler. Now, if you remember last year, he made a big name for himself by pinning Corey Brewer, who was a former champion, before he ended up blowing out his knee and having to miss the rest of the season. I feel like this could be Brock's year. I'm going to pick him to be in the finals, and I'm going to pick him to win. So at 141, this weight class, it's a tough weight class. So there are a lot of guys who have a chance to win. There isn't really one dominant guy at the top. Dean Heil is the number 1 guy. Heil's a guy who wrestles a lot of guys close, but he finds a way to win. So it's one of those things where you're not really all that impressed with him. You'd expect him to blow a lot of guys out that he doesn't blow out. Keeps it close, and you have to wonder at the NCAA tournament, if you're keeping it close too often, you might end up on the wrong side, whether it's off of a bad call or maybe stalling gets called when it shouldn't be called. So you don't really want to live by the sword because you'll die by the sword. That being said, I mean, as far as who I would pick if I'm not picking Heil, it's tough. Heil's won the national title before. He's undefeated this season. You almost have to have somebody prove that they're better than him, and as far as predictions go, I don't really see anyone who's going to be better. So as far as guys who can give him trouble, I think Ashnow is pretty good on the top half of the draw at the 5 seed. Klozik's really good as well. Klozik, I believe, beat Ashnow earlier in the season. I have a feeling that Ashnow could actually get to the semis here, but it's tough to pick him over Heil, so I'd put Heil in the finals. And then on the bottom half of the draw, you're looking at guys like George DiCamillo. Let's see who else. Joey McKenna from Stanford, Kevin Jack, who's 29-1 for NC State. I think Jack and McKenna are going to be the 2 guys here who are battling out for the other spot in the finals, and I'm going to give the edge in this one to Joey McKenna, but just a slight edge. Kevin Jack can definitely win that match. And then, again, like I was saying before, it's really tough to pick against Heil. Even though he wins a lot of close matches, he wins his matches. He's undefeated this year, and I think he's going to finish off his season undefeated and win the 141 title. At 149 pounds, this weight class is pretty much the Zane Rutherford weight class. There really isn't anyone who's threatened him that much. I think the closest match he's had this year was with Brandon Sorensen at Carver Hawkeye Arena. But since then, I mean, Sorensen's had some tough losses. He lost to Kalika. He lost to a guy from Edinburgh. I'm trying to remember who that was. But again, for Sorensen, the problem with that is that now he's in the top half of the draw, so he'll be in Zane Rutherford's. If he gets to the semis, he'll have to face Rutherford. And I think he will. Micah Jordan's got the 4 seed there, so Micah Jordan by seed is favored to get to the semifinals, but those two have gone back and forth. Jordan obviously won at the Big Tens, but Sorensen beat him in the duel earlier this season. It'd be a close match, but I think Sorensen will make it to the semis. So he'll have a rematch with Zane Rutherford at that point. They met in the finals last year. Obviously, this year would be in the semifinals, and Rutherford's just been so dominant that I can't pick against him, especially when Sorensen's been having a tough year. And then on the bottom half of the draw to meet him in the finals, Anthony Kalika and Le'Veon Mays are the top 2 seeded guys down there. Chisco from Virginia Tech can also make some noise. Beyond that, I feel like those are the only 3 who really have a great shot at getting through, and I'd have to pick Kalika over Mays because they've wrestled before and Kalika won that match, and Kalika's looked really impressive this year too. Obviously, he had his win over Sorensen. I don't think he's going to beat Zane Rutherford. He can be fairly competitive with him, but Zane's just at another level at 149. He's going to win this weight class, and I really don't see how anything can happen that would stop him. At 157, again, this is another weight class where there's a dominant Penn State wrestler at the top, and just kind of like the rest of the field looking to fight for number 2. On the top half of the draw, the other guys who might pose some sort of trouble to him are Tyler Berger, and I think JoJo Smith would be the other guy to look at. But again, Jason Nolf, he's undefeated this year, and not only is he undefeated, but he's dominant. He's winning most of his matches by bonus points. The only guy who seems to be able to go against him and not get bonus is Michael Kemmerer. But Kemmerer is the number 2 seed, and he's on the bottom half of the draw. And while we're talking about that, the top 2 guys on the bottom half of the draw are Kemmerer at number 2 and LaValle at 3. Berger's on the other half. Berger and Kemmerer have had a couple of close matches. Obviously, Kemmerer won both of them by a point. Berger has been stewing over that, obviously, prior to the Iowa meet. Iowa versus Nebraska meet. Berger had been tweeting about how much it must suck for Michael Kemmerer to be a marked man, and Kemmerer came through and won that match. And I'd expect him to win his half of the draw too. He's been very impressive as a freshman. 27-2. The only 2 losses are to Jason Nolf, and wasn't bonus either time. They both been relatively. I wouldn't necessarily say competitive. It's not like there was ever a point where you thought, oh, Kemmerer might pull this out, but he's hung in there. So I'll say Kemmerer and Nolf in the finals, and Nolf with the title. He's just been too dominant at 57. And speaking of dominant, we're going up another weight class to 165, where Isaiah Martinez is the number 1 overall seed. He's 27-0. He's undefeated this season. Other guys on his half of the draw that might be tough to deal with. I mean, Chandler Rogers has kind of had a bit of a tough season. You wonder what he's going to be able to do in the tournament. Chandler Rogers, of course, out of Oklahoma State. Chad Walsh out of Rider has been very good, but he hasn't had the best competition. Isaac Jordan could be tough, but he hasn't really given Aymar that tough of a match. So I have to pick Aymar to win his his top half of the draw and get into the finals. On the bottom half, you have Logan Massa, Anthony Valencia, Daniel Lewis could be pretty difficult. Vincenzo Joseph out of PSU, Penn State. Kind of tough to pick as far as who I think is going to get through on that half, but I would have to go if I'm picking one, and it's tough. I would say Daniel Lewis is going to surprise a lot of people and work his way into the finals there. It's going to be tough. This is one of those things where every year it's easy to pick the top seeds, but there's always going to be the upsets. I just feel like this half of the draw is really upset prone, and I think Lewis is going to be the guy to take advantage of that. But again, he'll be going up against Aymar. Aymar has been very dominant at 165, and I don't see that stopping in the finals. Aymar will win another national title for the University of Illinois. At 174, this is the weight class where I think the number 1 seed is the most vulnerable, and that's Zahid Valencia. And the reason I say that is just because he's been fairly limited in who he's gotten to wrestle against. He's undefeated this year. He's 33-0, so you can't knock the guy for that. All he can do is step on the mat and wrestle the guy who stands across him and beat him, and that's what he's done. But there are a lot of guys here who can be difficult. So Brian Real Buto's got the number 2 seed. He's on the bottom half of the draw. As far as the top half of the draw goes, you're looking at guys like Ethan Ramos, who's always been in that All-American picture, Mark Hall, Casey Kent, Zach Epperly. So if this is a freestyle tournament, I think Mark Hall should be the number 1 overall seed in that. Him and Valencia have gone at it quite a bit. Hall usually gets the better of him. But this is folk style, so there is a difference there. And Hall's had some trouble with that in the past. Obviously, he had a tough loss to Alex Meyer. He had a tough loss earlier on in the season. But from what I've seen from him lately, I think he's ready to do a lot, and I think he's going to win the top half of this draw. Him and Valencia are going to have a match, and he's going to beat Zahid Valencia in a close match and work his way into the finals. And then on the bottom half of the draw, you're looking at Bo Jordan, Brian Real Buto. Those are the top 2 seeds. You wonder what Alex Meyer can do. He's kind of one of those guys where he'll occasionally beat a guy who he's not supposed to beat, but then lose to a guy he's not supposed to lose to. You'd probably figure that's going to be what happens here again. He's probably going to lose to someone who's seated lower than him at some point, may even have an upset before then, but I don't really see him getting anywhere near the finals. Kyle Crutchmer is a guy who could cause a lot of problems. He's been very good in the past, but has had a relatively tough year by his standards. But I would pick Bo Jordan to get through on this half. I know Real Buto beat him before, but Bojo has been dealing with some injuries. It looks like he's been getting better. Had a good match with Mark Hall, and I think those two are going to rematch in the finals. And if you remember watching the Mark Hall and Bo Jordan match, at the end of the first period, Hall had gotten a takedown just as time expired. And since time had just expired, he didn't get the 2 points for it. Ended up losing that match in sudden victory, but again, if he gets that takedown, he completed the takedown, it was just the clock ended just at the worst time for him, then he wins the match, and he wins the match in regulation in all likelihood. Obviously, if the score changes, Bo Jordan's going to wrestle a little differently. You never know how that's going to work out, but Hall is definitely capable of beating Jordan, and I think this time he's going to. I think he's going to win the national title as a freshman, as a true freshman at that. At 184, this is probably the most competitive weight class. This has the most guys who have a chance to win it all. So Gabe Dean, two-time national champion, finished third his freshman year. He's going to be the favorite here, and it's going to be very hard to pick against him. He's 30-0. Some of the other guys who might be difficult to deal with are Zach Zavatsky, the number 5 seed in the top half of the draw, and Nolan Boyd. Number 4, Boyd's been very good, but he's had some tougher losses to some of the better competition, so you wonder how he's going to look. But really, if you look at the top half of the draw, I feel like the top 3 of the top 4 guys, if you're looking at it, you're looking at Sammy Brooks, you're looking at Miles Martin, and you're looking at Bo Nickel, and they're all in the bottom half of the draw. So for Gabe Dean, I think the route to the finals is going to be relatively clear for him. But that's where it gets difficult on the bottom half. So here's the thing. What we know about Miles Martin is that later on in the season, that's when he gets really good. That's when he gets really hot. Last year, he went in the tournament, I believe, as an 11 seed and won the national title. In the Big Ten tournament, it looked like he was kind of having a rough year at 84. Got to the finals, beating Bo Nickel on the way to doing so, and then lost to Sammy Brooks. Now, for Miles Martin, I think that Sammy Brooks matchup is a really bad matchup for him. Martin likes to do a lot of upper body work, but so does Brooks, and it looks like Brooks is better at the upper body game than Miles Martin is, and that's really given him a lot of problems. I think if these guys get matched up, Brooks is going to win, but the question is, does Brooks get to the point where he's matched up with Miles Martin? That would be a 3 versus 6 matchup in the quarterfinals. Sammy Brooks, again, he's won the Big Ten title twice. He was the number 2 seed in last year's tournament, but he seems to be kind of like Alex Meyer in that way where, if we're comparing him to another Iowa guy, where he'll beat a lot of guys where it's like, wow, I can't believe he just beat that guy, but then he'll lose to someone where you kind of expect him to win, and that's been the case in the past in the NCAA tournament. I'd love to think that he's going to get through. I think it's reasonable to assume that he could get through, but I've got a feeling he's not going to. He's going to fall off before he gets to Miles Martin, so that would leave Martin facing the winner of, most likely, of TJ Dudley and Bo Nickel. I think Bo Nickel wins that match. But then you've got Martin and Nickel going at it for a chance at, or in the semifinals for a chance at Gabe Dean. And, I mean, they've beaten each other already. Martin's beaten him in the final. He beat him in the Big Ten semifinals this year. He beat him in the national finals last year. I think he beats him again in the national semis this year and gets to the finals. But again, when you're looking at Miles Martin and Gabe Dean, that match has already been had. Gabe Dean was pretty dominant in it. Now, obviously, it was earlier in the year. Martin wrestles really well in March, but I don't see him rising to quite high enough a level to beat Gabe Dean this time around. At 197, Jaden Cox, the Olympic bronze medalist, is the number 1 overall seed, and that's a pretty fair ranking for him. The interesting thing here is going to be on the bottom half of the draw between Colin Moore and Brett Farr. So Brett Farr is getting the number 2 overall seed here, Colin Moore the 3. Colin Moore did beat Farr in the Big Ten finals. They're 2-1 right now. Farr has 2 wins to Moore's 1. The notable trend to look at there is that the first match between the two, Farr won by a large margin. The second match was a close match, and the third match, Moore won. So it seems like as the season's gone along, Moore has caught up and even got ahead. And if that trend continues, then you have to figure that Moore is going to win that match if they meet in the semis. And when I look at the rest of the bottom half of the draw, I don't know who would keep that semifinal match from happening. I mean, Preston Weigel is going to be tough for Moore, but it just seems like those two are the 2 and 3 guys in the nation right now. I'd give the advantage to Colin Moore. So you'd be looking at Colin Moore versus Jaden Cox. Now, Cox has won a lot of close matches this year. He hasn't been as dominant as people expected. I think after he got an Olympic bronze, a lot of people were expecting him to be a Hodge candidate. He's won a lot of tight matches. But again, part of that's just because it's really tough to score on him. And as good as Colin Moore is, I don't think he's going to be able to score on Jaden Cox enough. I think Cox is going to win this match. And as much as it pains me to say this, I think another number 1 seed is going to win. I feel like there are a lot of really strong number 1s who are way ahead of their field this year around, and that's a perfect example. And to finish this off, speaking of strong number 1 seeds who are way ahead of their field, Olympic champion, world champion Kyle Snyder at heavyweight. there really aren't too many people who are going to be all that close to him. Even Nick Neville's at number 5 in his half of the draw. Jacob Casper from Duke. Like, I don't expect those guys to even be within 5 points at best of what Kyle Snyder can do. So you'd have to book Kyle Snyder to the finals. I'm not sure who would even give him trouble and keep him from getting there. On the bottom half of the draw, Ty Walls versus Connor Medbury seems to be the likely semifinal there. Austin Schaefer, you wonder what he can do. Tanner Hall, he seems to kind of be right about where he's at number 7. I'd imagine that he'll probably finish there. I don't think he's going to pull a big upset. So if you're looking at Walls and Medbury, I'd have to give the edge to Medbury. Medbury seems to be the best heavyweight outside of Kyle Snyder this year, and I think he'll get to the finals against him. But again, that's a rematch of the Big Ten finals, and I don't think this is going to go any different than the last one did. So Kyle Snyder will win 285 again, just like he did last year. And that brings us to the team title. So for the team title, I think the biggest question that's going to come about is what's Nick Soriano going to be able to do? If Soriano does nothing, I think Penn State, Oklahoma State may be tight in there, especially if Cade Rock gets the win. And then Ohio State, those would be the ones who'd be competing for the national title. I think Soriano will probably win at least one match, if not 2. I think Mark Hall stepping up and winning his title is going to be big. I think Zane Rutherford and Jason Nolf are going to score a lot of points. And with all that being said, I think that's going to be enough to get Penn State to another national championship as their dynasty continues.